Welcome. Good day, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. I hope life is treating you beautifully. Welcome to Wisdom with Him. I'm your host, Samir, and I look forward to diving deep with you. I know you're going to love this episode. I urge you to listen to this podcast not like any other podcast. I invite you to listen to it from your heart, to listen to it as though it is a conversation between you and your deepest self, to really listen and feel into the words and see what resonates for you and leave what doesn't. I know you're going to receive value from it. I look forward to diving deep with you. Stay tuned and enjoy the episode.
We're going to be talking about boundaries. What are boundaries? Why they're necessary? And how come individuals who have grown up in environments where their needs were placed below the needs of somebody else in their family creates a pattern of functioning from a place consistently without appropriate boundaries? And what does that do to an individual as they grow up into adulthood? It creates a level in which the person is unable to healthily assert their limit, their capacity, their preference. Boundaries are necessary because they are what allow us as individuals to construct our definition of safety. Safety is imperative to self-expression. When an individual has had to forego their ability to honestly set a boundary, it is usually because their safety is being threatened in some form, and in turn, their self-expression. Because when we feel safe enough to express voluntarily our own boundaries, what our needs are, what our preference is, it gives us a safety, a space in where we can healthily allow ourselves to be ourselves. And when you grow up in an environment that is toxic, dysfunctional, abusive, where as a child, especially if you're displaying the fawning trauma response, as we mentioned earlier, that is to say, you please people as a way of garnering your safety, you will become adept at abandoning yourself and sacrificing what your true feelings and needs are in a certain situation in order to maintain the needs and responses of the individual you are focused upon. Now, if this is a parent figure or a family member or a person of authority, it can be almost impossible to truly assert yourself if you are being cast in a position of disapproval, you're being punished, you're being blamed, you're being told that you are creating the conflict by speaking out of turn, by sharing your feelings the way you are. This is all very important because our feelings are valid and our feelings are responses to stimulation and situations that we experience. Now, when we experience a feeling, it would be ignorant to say that we can control our feelings. We can't. Our feelings, they move through our systems in almost a floodgate. And when our feelings are activated and we are not allowed a safe space to express those emotions, we will then in turn repress those emotions. And we will consciously deny those emotions, and we will do our very best to suppress them. This creates havoc on our nervous system because our nervous system has nowhere to allow the release of those emotions which have been activated in our system. Now, if the system has been activated through a survival state and fear has arisen, fear is going to create a level of imbalance and agitation and restlessness inside as your cortisol levels are heightened and as your adrenal systems kick in. And if it is a highly stressful state and your adrenal response is to release adrenaline, your system will have such a higher level of energy moving through it, that to not have a healthy and safe outlet for it is detrimental to the individual. Now, without getting too convoluted in our conversation, I want to break down boundaries in a very simple way. I want you to understand that when you assert a boundary, when you clarify a boundary, when you announce your boundary, you are giving yourself definition. You are allowing yourself to have the space to define who you are by stating what you prefer. And as individuals, as sovereign individuals, we need to have and cultivate a healthy sense of self. When we are forced to deny ourselves, forced to limit our expression, forced to accept and tolerate situations and patterns of behavior from others without being able to healthily outlet and express ourselves, we are prone to using masks as a way of coping and as a way of dealing with different changing situations. This in turn will look like a character or a person who is very good at reading a room and very good at putting on the appropriate personality that will receive attention, approval, and acceptance in that room. So, this is often called shape-shifting or being a chameleon. And, it has forms of a strength to it in certain contexts where you can connect with a lot of different people. But what happens is we stray away from authentic self-expression. And this comes from a root fear that if we are to healthily express our truest self and our truest desire of what we are asking for, there is risk involved in that. Risk of being abandoned, risk of being rejected, risk of being shamed, judged, punished, or even harmed. And when this occurs, there can be a looming imprint in the subconscious mind towards hiding your authentic wants, needs, and desires. And in turn, your authentic sense of self gets layered, if not completely destroyed by your own experiences. So how do we cultivate a healthy sense of self? How do we start to actually garner our own self-definition and hold forth with that definition? Because this is the second part of boundaries, is to actually enforce those boundaries with people, especially with people who have gotten used to, practiced in taking advantage of us when we don't have our boundaries, when we are liable to giving without restraint, and in turn, other people have benefited, profited, and taken advantage of that. So this is very difficult for people who have never been able to create healthy boundaries in a family structure. And then in turn, when they go on a path of healing and self-reclamation, are placed in a position where they have to now enforce boundaries with people that they truly love. But these are people who took advantage of the fact that this individual did not get to actually do as they choose, whether that looked like them saying no in situations that they felt uncomfortable, whether that looks like them saying they do not wish to participate in a certain type of conversation, certain activity. Boundaries are all a way of allowing the individual to create safety. So how does safety get created? When we have safety, we feel autonomous within ourselves to be our authentic self. Now, what does that look like? It looks like being able to say, I like this, I don't like that. It is the ability to discern preference, to create preferences based on what you truly like and desire. Now, this is different for each individual, but if you have become practiced at abandoning yourself, you will often retort to the answer in said situations as, I don't know. I don't know what I want. Where do you want to go out for dinner? I don't know. You choose. And in turn, we will become used to avoiding responsibility for our choices, and we will project the place of making decisions and choices upon another, because we've never actually been given the ability to actually own and honor our desires, preferences, and choices. And if that has been the case, then often somebody else made the decision. So cue in self-doubt when you are now in a position where you have to honor and create boundaries. Doubt will emerge. Very common, because you have not been given the safety in previous circumstances to practice saying what you want and experiencing the outcome, and in turn realizing that it's okay to make mistakes, to make choices that don't often work out. When we're scared to make mistakes, when we're scared to make choices for ourselves that don't always lead in a direction that is immediately positive, although when you do make choices for yourself, you will learn about yourself. You will learn about what you need. You will learn about what you're truly asking for, because in the world we're in, you learn by what you do not want. You know what you want by experiencing what you don't want. And oftentimes when you have difficulty truly identifying what you want, you're better off focusing on what you don't want so you can become very clear about what you are asking for, because the contrast gives us perspective. The contrast gives us choice. Now, making choices for ourselves, especially when you have been often giving away your power of choice to somebody else so that you don't have to take responsibility for yourself because you have never been allowed to authentically express yourself. So because you don't know yourself and you don't know what you want and you don't know what it will lead to, you would rather live in doubt and fear of making a mistake and give up the autonomy entirely. And this is why this is so significant, because when you give up autonomy and you give up your ability to make choices, you no longer have autonomy of your life and the direction you are going. Now, if this has been practiced since childhood, this will look like massive crisis in indecision when it comes to making any significant choices for yourself that will affect your future. So this can be choices regarding school, choices regarding career path, choices regarding partners, choices regarding any form of longstanding commitment in where you are the predominant experiencer. And this is very significant because if you begin practicing living your life based on choices other people garner for you, you will have a very low sense of self-confidence when it comes to making the appropriate choices for you, especially if you've grown up in a family structure where it was highly disciplinarian. It was a form of high levels of punishment or abuse if you did not do what you were told to do, then you will be very likely to avoid making conscious, bold, risky decisions that are coming from a place of authentic self-expression, because the fear will be so great that if I do something wrong, there will be consequences. If I choose something wrong, there will be consequences. So you are more likely to live in a place of indecision. And this place of indecision will leave you in a place of waiting and limbo when it comes to truly moving the needle of your life forward. Because if somebody doesn't take that responsibility for you, you are left uncertain, unsure, and self-doubting. And this will not work as a sovereign human being in the world we're in now. Because to be a sovereign human being, you must take responsibility for your life. No one is going to live this life for you. And you know this if you're participating in this program, that sovereignty is the key to fulfillment and lasting happiness. Because through the journey of self-sovereignty, we reclaim the parts of ourselves that we have lost to previous past moments. And the parts of ourselves that need to be reclaimed are the parts of ourselves that never got acknowledged. And when you're in the journey of developing and cultivating healthy boundaries for yourself, you are in a process of consciously recognizing and acknowledging what you do want. So, for example, to simplify this, let's say, for instance, very small decisions are very big for you, and you find it difficult to make simple, small decisions because you are practiced at letting other people make these decisions. This is going to be the beginning of becoming self-curious, curious about who you are, and curious about your own wants, curious about what does make you tick, curious about what does make you feel good. And this is a beautiful part of the process, because if you have no boundaries and you've suffered from the inability to have a conscious sense of self, and you have been very adept at people pleasing and letting other people decide the way the course of the tide of your experience goes, this is going to be a very fun part of the journey of healing for you, because to reclaim autonomy is truly liberating and truly empowering and fun, because you start to become the active decision maker. And the fundamental crux behind this is that you cannot make decisions that are fundamentally wrong for you. When this becomes implemented within you, and you understand this at a shift within, that no decision you make is wrong for you, you're going to start having fun with life again. Right now, the concept of right and wrong is coming from your early childhood conditioning. Now, I'm not telling you that there's no wrong decision in the form of consequence. I'm saying that in life, we are constant learners within our experience. And yes, there is a matrix of what consequences look like based on what actions you take. But truly, based on your own sovereign journey in this experience we call life, you are the heralder of your own experience, and you will learn through your experience. Now, is that to say go harm somebody? No. Is that to say go and do something that harms yourself? No. But I do want to be absolutely clear. If you are lingering and avoiding true conscious desires that exist within you at a subconscious level, because remember, your conscious mind has been conditioned to behave, to adhere to the societal constructs that you have agreed upon, to agree to the family matrix that you have grown up in. That means that what is allowed within the family home, you've adopted as, yes, this is what I agree to. And so in turn, I will practice this forward. These are all things that condition our conscious mind and our conscious perspective. Now, this does not necessarily mean this applies to what your truest wants, needs, and desires are. And in the subconscious realm of our mind, all primal instincts, desires, and wants are allowed and play out. They do not abide by our behavioral conditioned conscious mind. That's why when you have dreams at night, you may have dreams that pull from your truest abstract desires, wants, and needs and play them out in the subconscious reality of your dream time. This is very important for you to understand, because if you deny yourself authentic, true acknowledgement of what your desires are, you will find sneaky, hidden, and suspicious ways often to play these things out in the shadows. In this context, what is important is for you to understand self-honesty, radical self-honesty with yourself, without the looming perspective of right and wrong, good and bad, is imperative to begin to understand the truth of what you desire, the truth of what you are asking for, the truth of what you are wanting. Why? Because from a place of neutrality, everything is allowed as a possibility. And it's only through conditioning that we get taught what is allowed and what is not allowed, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. And it is through that conditioning we start to mold ourselves, mold our character and our personality. And in turn, we learn to avoid and suppress certain desires that do not or that are not deemed as acceptable. So this is very important to understand. Within yourself, you are the first point in where you have to decide to create the foundation of safety. Safety within yourself will look like tolerance, allowance, and acceptance of your truest thoughts, feelings, and desires. This is very important, because within your own experience, within your own body, within your own mind, within your own heart and soul, you have to take note, acknowledge, and truly come from a place of inner understanding. That is to understand where you are coming from. It doesn't do you service. It doesn't do you justice to try and fit the mold of what your family structure, what societal structure, what your school friends, what everybody else is doing, when it doesn't take into account your own direct experience. So you can be saying to everybody, yes, I want to do this. Yes, I want to be this type of person. Yes, I do want to try these things. But if those are all stemming from a place that is inauthentic, it's coming from a place of wanting approval, wanting acceptance, wanting others to justify and validate your choices, you're still going to be denying something that's deeper within, and really recognizing within what you are asking for is what this whole journey is about, because reclaiming your choice is directly connected to reclaiming your sovereignty. And the only way you can reclaim your choice is by first allowing yourself to observe neutrally, without a perspective of judgment, what you are truly sensing, feeling, desiring. This will allow you to, in turn, use authentic, honest self-expression, which comes from a place of verbalization, that is to use your voice to ask and to create these experiences for yourself. Understand, as a human being, it is safe for you, when you responsibly take ownership of what you're asking for, to create your own desires, to create your own lived experiences. Now, I'm going to give you a direct example. If, for instance, you've grown up in a family structure where sexuality has been made taboo, your parents did not talk about it, your family structure was very avoidant of the concept, yet socially you've experienced dialogues through your friends, through social media, technology, your mind inadvertently will have contemplated sexuality, contemplated sexual expression. You're riddled with choice and possibility through observation of the internet, through friends, dialogues, and this in turn leaves you wanting, leaves you in question. Now, your conscious mind has certain limits around it based on what your family has allowed you to connect with around the subject. And this in turn will mean that the deeper part of yourself will not feel safe to ask particular questions, may not even allow you to literally go in that part of your mind and question, wonder, and just simply think about the possibility, because you will feel an overwhelming level of judgment coming from the conditioned part of your mind that has learned to behave from your family structure. So this is where this work is very important, because to get in authentic connection with yourself requires a level of honesty and willingness to play with yourself in terms of allowing yourself to be honest about what you really feel, think, and want from situations within life. Now, especially when it comes to primal instincts, the urges to hunt, the urge to have sex, the urge to eat, the urge to create. These are all urges that are very primal in nature. And when we deny these because society has compartmentalized the way that we experience these things now, doesn't mean that your primal self will not have these wants, urges, and desires. So learning yours is very important, because this is how you create what? Boundaries that are going to allow you to create safety in asking, creating, and creating lived experiences. So when you are discerning what are my choices, what are my wants, what are my needs, it's going to begin by you starting to recognize, through a place of curiosity and a place of non-judgment and neutrality, what are things that I have not even allowed myself to think about? What are things that I have not allowed myself to even look at that I'm actually curious about? What kind of places would I want to travel to if I had the choice? What kind of places would I want to experience? What kind of foods would I like to try if I went beyond the mundane? What kind of people would I like to interact with that are outside of my normal experience? What kind of sexual experiences am I actually interested in? What kind of real dream-like experiences am I wanting to create, but I've never allowed myself to even fantasize about? These are the type of questions that begin to pull the layers back behind your truest fascinations. This is a one-time experience we call life. And when you've experienced trauma, most of the time you are just in a place of survival. So you don't even allow yourself the possibility to consider, what would you have created had that trauma never happened? What would you have created if life was just the open canvas that we are all available to? The realm of possibility is open, wide, and endless. So to begin this journey of conscious creation of your boundaries is to realize that you must garner safety first from within, recognizing that within must become a place of safety. And you are the determiner of that. How? By withdrawing self-judgment towards yourself, withdrawing the light of shame upon yourself. When? you play out the contemplation of possibility. Contemplation of possibility is in the realm of imagination, and we must allow a measure of safety within our imagination, and we must recognize that no thoughts are ours to own. We must recognize there are no thoughts you own independently. Thoughts function much like a field of awareness, and they come and go like clouds in the sky. And oftentimes we have been judged, shamed, or placed in a position of guilt for having certain thoughts because we have been deeming those thoughts as good and bad. The reality is thoughts come and go. And if you choose to observe like the sky, you need not take ownership of any thoughts that arise within your mind. Now, if you can come to a place of central, neutral, non-judgmental observation of your thoughts, you will allow those thoughts to move in and out of your field of awareness and just simply notice what gets your attention. This is imperative when it comes to imagination, because it's in imagination that we allow our thoughts to unfold towards highest levels of possibility. Every great creation, every inventor, every person who has sought to go beyond their limits has first had to see it play out in their mind, in the realm of imagination. And it's been studied at high levels that when you play something out in your mind as a possibility, you actually invite it into your direct lived experience. Because we as human beings are very interesting creatures. We live in a physical reality, but yet we only experience our internal imaginary reality. And then we superimpose that in the direct world. And that experience, which we have deemed predictable and possible within our mind, gets recreated in the physical world. And we see it in our experience. They've given many examples, but I'm going to give you one. For instance, let's say, for instance, you're not sure what car you're going to buy, and then you suddenly decide, I would like to buy a red Volkswagen buggy. All of a sudden, in that contemplation and in that internal desire and acceptance in your imagination that this is the car I want, notice the awareness of the individual becomes so aware of that desire that they start to see red buggies everywhere they go, or Volkswagens, and they start to notice this more and more. And this is because our brain has a particular part of it that gets activated. And when this brain portion gets activated, it starts to focus on the things that you are focused on and trying to find them in the physical world. All of a sudden, you start inviting that direct experience into your life. We are much like magnets. And so when we get clearer and clearer within around what we're truly wanting, desiring, and we can begin focusing on that internally, allowing it to play out in our imagination, we are much more likely to create it in our direct experience, inviting opportunities and experiences that we can then translate into lived experience. And this is what the game of life allows for. But when you don't have a conscious, concrete sense of self because you've had to abandon yourself to others, you're very likely to give up in the process of creating your reality, and in turn live out reality passively, much like a spectator as opposed to being a player. There is a number of people in our world right now who spend their time criticizing, judging, and commentating on others and not taking direct action themselves. And I liken it to watching a basketball game. There's many people in the crowd who will comment, judge, yell, get emotional, and express themselves, but have no impact on the game. The players have direct impact on the game. The players, in fact, ignore everybody in the crowd. They must stay focused on the game and the moment at hand and focus directly on the ball and where it's going and moving based on that, directing themselves. And in turn, this is life. We must choose to either be a player and make choices, act and live in the moment and make direct decisions that will affect the consequences of the game. But we cannot, in turn, while playing the game, become committed to being a spectator simultaneously. In fact, we must drown out the noise that is around us. And this noise comes in the form of our thoughts, looming negative thoughts that come through in the form of cyclical, repetitive patterns, because they draw your attention away from the moment and draw your attention towards past memory, past pain, and past experiences that the mind has become practiced in projecting outwards as fearful scenarios because it's concerned that this will come back again into the experience. However, if you want a new experience, you have to construct the boundaries of your own safety so that you can directly allow yourself to move into the unknown from a place of self-security. And this is very important. So how do we create our self-security? It starts by creating neutrality within and observing within from a place of neutrality and non-judgment all the thoughts that exist within us and not identifying with any of them, observing them, and then becoming very curious about what do we want, asking yourself probing questions. What would I want if? What would I want if this was allowed? What would I want if the best case scenario happened? Then from this place, you start to allow yourself to ideate and to play out in your imagination positive possibilities that you ultimately desire, because that's what this is about, finding out what you truly like versus what you don't like. Now, you will know more clearly if you don't know where to start based on things you don't like. So if you don't like certain foods, you'll know that you're not going to gravitate towards those foods and you're going to focus on other foods. You'll know if you don't like certain types of living situations, then you'll like potentially these types of other situations that contrast that. So start from where you don't like and what you don't like if you're finding it difficult to discern what you do want, and make a list. And it's great to make lists and to play out this through written expression, because it allows you to contemplate through word and through thought possibilities that you might not even let yourself really go into. And if you do, I really recommend you start a journal or creative writing prompt whereby you just write what you want and what you would desire if there was no limit and no boundary. And from this place of open imagination where there is no boundaries on what's possible because the mind can truly think of anything, you are now inviting a place of concrete boundaries, because now through these boundaries, you're going to be able to directly say, I know I want to achieve X. Potentially you're aiming for a new job or a new career path. And you know this because you know that you don't like working, let's say your 9-to-5 job. And so in that, what you don't want, you are identifying what you do want. I want to create a job that works for me. That means that I can work at my own schedule and my own time. That's not confining me to the 9-to-5 structure. So now you start to look out remote jobs. Now you start to seek out what field you want to be in based on the fields that you're desiring. As you go deeper into this process, now you're asking yourself, what would really be possible? What would I really like? What would I want if this is an open choice and an open canvas? What could I ask for that would actually make me happiest? And as you go through this process, now you start to think about more and more possibilities. And as the possibilities come through, your mind will start looking for physical reflections of this in the reality. As you're looking through job sites, as you're applying for things, as you're creating things, inspiration will start to come through. Now, as this comes through, somebody else will provide you maybe an opportunity for another 9-to-5 job and say, hey, we have an opening in our company for this. And now you will have a new choice to make, a choice to either go to what is familiar or a choice to stay the course and realize that this opportunity is coming up as a reflection of the process of you sifting and sorting through contrast, because you are actually getting closer to the boundary of what you are asking for. The boundary is what you are deciding is what you want. That's what boundaries create. Functionally, a boundary creates self-definition and identification for yourself around what you are choosing to play with and function with and show up as in the world. So when a person offers you another job that's another 9-to-5 and you say, no, I don't want that, you enforceably place your boundary against what you don't want, and it leans you into the creation of what you do want. Now, this applies directly when it comes to relationships as well. Creating boundaries about behaviors you will tolerate, things and actions you will tolerate versus those which you will not. Now, you may be practiced in tolerating certain actions, practiced in certain patterns of your own behavior. If you're practiced in giving and giving without saying no, even when you're tired, well, maybe this is where you're going to place one of your beginning boundaries, to notice that when my inner exhaustion is mounting, when I'm getting tired, and it's difficult for me to do anything because I've taken too much on my plate, recognizing this is going to be a new boundary you address, you will now actualize and anchor the fact that you will say no when you are tired. And this may be very difficult for some of you when you show your love to someone by giving and sacrificing yourself for another, but recognizing that without boundaries, you lose your sense of self. And when you lose your sense of self, you fundamentally feel lost. You will find yourself in emotional burnout. You'll find yourself irritable, quick to temper and judgmental, all because you've not been able to safely conjure a space for yourself in where you can just find relief. And this is the gift of boundaries. When you conjure your own relief, when you create the boundaries of your own definition of what you will allow, tolerate, and deem acceptable for you, You get safety, which allows you to be in a place of relief. And relief is imperative for creation, because when you're in a place of relief, you're in a place of living internally without the mounting pressure of having to perform. You're in a place where you can actually create. There's a difference. When we don't have boundaries, and we're often giving of ourselves, and often just allowing our energy to leak out because we don't know how to say no to the things that we don't want and say yes in turn to the things that we do want, you will find yourself in a place of exhaustion and frustration because you're not able to actually move yourself forward. You find yourself stuck in a rut. And this is very important because when you create safety, it's like clearing all the leaks in a boat. It allows the boat to keep moving in the direction it's actually aiming. It wasn't meant to sink in the middle of the waters. It was meant to keep going. But when you haven't developed your boat properly, and potentially you have a boat, but maybe it's not as strong as it could be, this is all a call to action around creating concrete, healthy boundaries, because the tenet behind boundaries is safety, creating safety for yourself. And by creating that safety for yourself, you in turn have a structure for yourself to move yourself from where you are to where you want to be. And when you have the voice within to honor your boundaries, this is the next part of the puzzle, to honor those boundaries that you've created for yourself, because you will have a self that has been adapted at giving itself up, to giving up its own inner accountability to its boundaries. That's your practice. That's your pattern when you don't have boundaries. It is going to require diligence, accountability, and conscious effort to maintain your word with yourself when you are desiring to move the needle forward, to move yourself from where you are to where you want to be. Because you will actually have to be the one who commits to what you are asking, because you understand fundamentally that if you don't commit, you're going to be left tired, depleted, and exhausted, and burnt out, and resentful. And if you do commit, you're going to be happier because you're actually going to be taking care of yourself. You're going to be practicing self-autonomy, and you're going to be sovereign in your capacity to create safety for yourself, which means you get to practice conscious relief, which means that in a place of relief, you can think about life and its possibilities clearer. Your imagination is more fluid. Possibilities are more abounding in your consciousness. And in turn, you can directly deliberate the choice points of where you're actually trying to create your life, moving your life forward, as opposed to living in a place of stagnation, sameness, and repetitive negative cycles where you give up yourself to others, let other people guide the trajectory of your life because you haven't been able to discern for yourself what you want. And because you don't know how to discern what you want, you in turn give up your autonomy and your responsibility for yourself. And in turn, you're constantly finding yourself at the beck and call of others and their choices. And this again leaves you in a place of unempowerment versus you taking the sovereign responsibility of choosing to empower yourself by owning it is first your responsibility to create safety within your own mind and body by removing the layers and filters of self-judgment, shame, and self-sabotage in your imagination. If you shame yourself for having thoughts of sexual desires, if you shame yourself for wanting to ask for more money and create more wealth than your family has ever experienced, and you shame yourself for these things, you judge yourself for these things, and you find yourself when you start creating boundaries, this is very common. You will experience guilt when you say no to somebody that you have been practiced saying yes to. Understand this. This is very important. When you say no to somebody else, you're saying yes to you. Whereas when you have said yes to everybody else, you have been constantly saying no to you. And this is what is flipping. Because when you are practiced in self-abandonment, when you are practiced at giving yourself up for others, even if you have deemed it virtuous, deemed it as a powerful, noble quality, at the end of the day, you are the one who gets sacrificed. You are the one who becomes the martyr. And the reality is, for your life to move forward in the direction I know you want it to go, which is in a place of abundance, thriving, happiness, wealth, health, you must commit fundamentally to creating safety for yourself first, and realizing that no one can create that safety for you but you. It is your responsibility. It is your birthright. And it is absolutely necessary and imperative for you to heal. So I know we discussed a lot, but it's so imperative that you understand the power of what creating boundaries does. It changes your life. It gives you a definition of yourself. It creates a conscious, healthy sense of self by identifying what your wants and what you don't want is. It allows you to have preferences. It allows you to say no to the things that you don't want and yes to the things you do. It allows you to say no when you have a limit and in turn respect your own health, wealth, and boundaries inside. It allows you to recognize safety starts from within, having a neutral perspective within your mind and your body, having neutrality when it comes to your imagination, not judging yourself for the thoughts you have, becoming curious about yourself, recognizing thoughts are like clouds and you are the sky. You need not own any of your thoughts, just allow them to be and to pass through. And this in turn will allow you to sift and sort through your imagination about what you are actually asking for. And if you are stuck in a place of I don't know because you don't know what you want, and you really don't, start with what you don't want. Start with the things you've identified readily that you don't like in your experience, starting from people, relationships, modes of behavior, situations, experiences, environments, and start going from what I don't want and create that list of what you do want. This is going to be the beginning as we move forward, because as you start to consciously create self-definition and healthy respect for yourself by enforcing these boundaries, by saying no consciously and volitionally to the things that no longer serve you, you will start to create a healthy foundation for everything that is going to come in your world and reality. And this is going to allow you to move the needle forward in your life, and it's going to allow you move you from where you are to what you want it, where you want to be. And it all starts by acknowledging you at the deepest level, and acknowledging that you have to honor your wants, needs, and desires before anybody else can. And if you are practiced at avoiding, denying, and ignoring your wants, needs, and desires, this is going to be a fun part of this process. It's going to be a really curious part of this process for you, because it's going to be the part of the process where you gain the most self-awareness and self-discovery, because you're going to become interested in you and who you are and what life can actually give you. So you may need to rehear this portion a couple of times for it to really sink in. And I want to commend you and acknowledge you for coming this far and for making the determined effort to create safety in your life so that you can live a sovereign, free life in where you choose where you're going. And you choosing for you will always work out, because when you do choose yourself and you continue to choose yourself, life has a beautiful way of rewarding that and rewarding you. So continue to commit yourself to the work, to the process, and to the practice, and hold forth. Best is yet to come.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Wisdom with Him. I'm your host, Samir, and I look forward to seeing you again on the next episode. I hope you received everything you needed from this episode and that it supports you wherever you are in your journey right now. If you did receive some value from this episode, all I'd ask is that you would share this episode with a friend or someone you love so that they too may receive something from it. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your energy. Be well and stay blessed. We'll see you soon.